All right, folks, joining us in this segment is our friend, Professor William Jacobson, Professor of Law at Cornell Law School, Director of the Security Law Clinic at Cornell Law. Professor, welcome back. Great to have you, sir.
Thank you for having me on again.
It's my pleasure. This whole business with the intelligence community and the leaks, and of course the media, we know what they're going to do. They're going to run with it forever. What's going on? You wrote a great piece, and I should point out it's at legalinsurrection.com. You said that this is an intelligence community media trial of Trump by innuendo.
Right. This was regarding the allegations that he might have done something improper or wrong with regard to Russia, or that maybe one of his aides did, or somebody on his campaign. And what's really happened is there's been these leaks reported in the Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, of supposed contacts between people on the Trump campaign and Russian intelligence officers. And that's supposed to conjure up something very nefarious, maybe even illegal. But that's all we have. We don't know what the contacts were. Were they knowing? Were they intentional? What was discussed? Was anything improper done? Instead, they just throw out that little tidbit, which leads to all sorts of speculation that there must have been something wrong.
And to me, in fact, Professor, again, the vice presidential debate gets into me where I'm forced to interrupt after watching the Democratic candidate. But if you read that New York Times story, which certainly was a recipient of these leaks, they specifically said that according to those who have been investigating that they spoke to, and that's been going on, that investigation, if you also read the story, for months, ever since there was first the sign of a hack at the DNC, they have found no evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian intelligence with regard to the election. So that little tidbit is thrown in there, but that's ignored by the media and the left.
That's right. And you have to read most of the way down into the article to even find that. That should have been the headline. Instead, the headline was, I forget the precise headline,
right,
but FBI uncovers connections or uncovers contacts. That's the word that keeps being used. Contacts. What does that mean? And this is, to me, an extremely unfair way to essentially prosecute somebody, because it gives all of the people who hate Trump license to speculate. There's a lot of people speculating that Trump's going to go to prison for the rest of his life, etc. There's a lot of people out there on Twitter who supposedly have connections to the intelligence community saying, well, we know things that you don't know, and he's going down. And how do you respond to that? How does Trump respond to that? But as somebody who observes the media, how do I even evaluate that, or the public even evaluate it? Because there's no facts.
Right.
There's alleged contacts, but nothing more.
Well,
and so it's in many ways the worst possible way to leak something.
And of course, it's not just the media as a result of these leaks. It's the politicians on the left. I don't know if you heard this. I played this earlier for the panel. Maxine Waters, and you got to take it with a grain of salt because it is Maxine Waters.
Right.
But nonetheless, listen to what she said about many of the cabinet members in the Trump administration.
And I just think the American people had better understand what's going on. This is a bunch of scumbags. That's what they are.
Those are very strong words,
organized around making money.
Who do you mean by that when you call them scumbags? Who are you talking about?
All of these people who are organized with these oil and gas interests that's in the administration and friends of the President of the United States, this back-channeling that you see, these are a bunch of scumbags.
Secretary of State, you mean the Secretary of State of the United States?
Well, I tell you this, Tillerson is there to get these sanctions lifted.
Talking about Russia, talking about the Russian connections, back channels, blah, blah, blah. You know, this is a woman who's talked about impeaching Trump. But this is, I mean, even for the left, that's way over the line.
Well, it is, but it's just indicative of what's coming out of even elected Democratic officials. The language is insane. It's completely unhinged. It's frankly what you saw at the worst of the Bush era, but we're only in the first month of the Trump era.
Oh, yeah.
And so
yeah. Much worse, much worse, even worse than what they did to Nixon, according to Ben Stein, who was there with Nixon at the time. Let me ask you, you wrote another piece about Nikki Haley, our current UN ambassador, and her staunch support, particularly in a speech that she gave at the United Nations, supporting Israel and really knocking the United Nations history of really singling out Israel.
Yeah, it was a great speech. It was a press appearance. It was her first chance to address the press. And she did what I call a Daniel Patrick Moynihan moment. Your viewers may recall his famous speech opposing the UN Zionism is racism resolution, where he stood and he said that this will not stand, we will not accept it. Very powerful speech. Hers, I don't know if it was quite that level, but it was pretty close. She recited the history of anti-Israel bias at the UN, and she said, and I am here to tell you that the days of us turning a blind eye to that are over. And that really sent a message to everybody. It was a very courageous message, and it was what we have not heard really ever from diplomats, except maybe Jeane Kirkpatrick and Daniel Patrick Moynihan and John Bolton to some extent. So really, but certainly in the Obama era, everything was deferential to the UN, looked to the UN for all the solutions to all the problems, always blamed us. And Nikki Haley to stand up there and says, we are not going to stand for you beating up on Israel anymore, well, I think was very powerful.
Well, that's certainly indicative of the fact that Donald Trump is an anti-Semite. And, you know, so, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Very quickly, you know, so the court, we're waiting the executive order, and it's going to go back to the court, blah, blah, blah. But they're even talking about going to court over what Trump is now doing. But all Trump is now doing, and we have a minute left, is enforcing the laws that are already in existence. That's what yesterday's Department of Homeland Security directives were about, enforcing current law.
That's right. That's what's so insane about this lawfare strategy of theirs, is that he's simply enforcing current law. But you have to understand, it's a strategy. There are hundreds of federal courthouses and judges they can go to, and they just have to get lucky once. People forget that on Trump's prior executive order, the opponents lost in Massachusetts federal district court, but they got somebody in Seattle to go along with them. So they only have to win once. The Trump administration has to win every single time.
Yeah. All right. Professor, great to talk to you again. Folks, check out the professor's columns as mentioned, and we'll speak to you again soon.